Lately, the skies over Europe have been getting crowded, and not in a good way. Russian drones have been slipping into NATO airspace, buzzing over borders they have no business crossing. Fighter jets have even had to step in near the Baltic Sea to escort suspicious aircraft away. September turned into a turning point. What used to feel like small, sneaky provocations suddenly started looking like a bold new stage of Russia's hybrid warfare strategy. A mix of intimidation, disruption, and testing how far they can push without sparking a full-scale war. The scary part? Moscow is acting like it doesn't care about consequences. But Europe may finally be ready to draw a line. Behind the scenes, leaders are talking about building something never seen before. A massive drone shield stretching across NATO's eastern borders. Think of it as an invisible wall in the sky, built to detect, block, and destroy any drones Russia tries to send across. If it actually comes together, this could completely change the balance of power in Europe's airspace, and maybe derail Vladimir Putin's plans for a wider war on the continent. These talks aren't just whispers. On September 22nd, Politico revealed that discussions are heating up inside the European Union. A high-level online meeting has been scheduled for September 26th, bringing together 7 countries that live right on NATO's front line: Finland, Poland, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, Bulgaria, and Romania. These are the states that feel Russian pressure most directly, and they're now at the center of Europe's defense planning. Also joining the talks, Andris Kubilius, the EU Commissioner for Defense and Space, along with a representative from Ukraine, the country that has turned drones into one of the most powerful tools on the battlefield. Ukraine's participation may hint at a bigger role, helping Europe design and possibly even manufacture the drones needed to build this skywall. The timing of all this is no accident. Just days earlier, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen gave her annual State of the Union address, where she threw her full support behind a tougher stance along NATO's eastern edge. She described this border, from the icy waters of the Baltic to the Black Sea, as the shield that protects the whole continent. Her message couldn't have been clearer. The time for hesitation is over. Russia's provocations aren't hypothetical. They're already happening. And she's right. In recent weeks, Russian drones even drifted into Polish airspace, forcing Poland to activate its air defenses. That close call rattled the region and accelerated cooperation. By September 23rd, at least 8 countries had signed on to contribute military hardware to shore up Europe's skies. France has dispatched Rafale fighter jets to Poland. Britain is sending Typhoon jets, plus an Airbus A400M transport plane. Denmark has deployed a naval ship into the Baltic Sea to extend protection from the water. It's starting to look like NATO and the EU are finally moving in sync. NATO's immediate approach has been straightforward: send member nations' air defenses and fighter jets to the hotspots most at risk. But the EU's drone wall concept suggests something bigger: a permanent, coordinated system designed to stop Russia's unmanned aircraft before they even become a threat. The idea of Europe's drone wall isn't just about tossing up swarms of drones to fight Russia's drones in midair. It's more like a digital shield, a massive high-tech barrier meant to spot, track, and neutralize anything Moscow sends across NATO borders. Whether this project eventually folds into NATO's larger defense strategy, like the still-developing Operation Eastern Century, isn't totally clear. But it's hard to ignore the overlap. Every country Ukraine invited to the September 26th meeting, Poland, Finland, the Baltic states, Bulgaria, and Romania, is already part of NATO. That alone suggests the drone wall may end up working hand-in-hand with NATO operations. And it would have to. The eastern flank stretches for more than 1,200 miles. That's not just a border, it's practically an entire front line. Covering all of it will take careful planning about where to place sensors, how to connect them, and when to deploy active defenses. The good news? This isn't just a wild new idea. European defense firms have already drawn up blueprints. In fact, a system called Iron Shield is at the heart of the proposal. Iron Shield isn't a single machine. It's a whole network. It's being developed by Origin Robotics, a Latvian company, along with DefSec Intel, which specializes in automated surveillance. Together, they've built a platform that combines radars, cameras, and radio frequency sensors to create a kind of invisible fence in the sky. The system doesn't just see incoming drones. It can figure out where they came from, what kind of drone they are, and whether they're harmless or dangerous. And here's the futuristic part. Iron Shield is designed to run itself. According to Origin's CEO, Agris Kapoors, the system can automatically decide whether to jam a drone's signal, scramble its navigation, or launch an interceptor drone to chase it down. In other words, humans set the rules, but the system reacts in real time. Speed is where things get tricky. Iron Shield can track targets moving at about 124 miles per hour. That's fast enough to catch Russia's widely used Shahed-136 drones, which top out around 111 miles per hour, as well as updated models that push 130 miles per hour. But Russia is also experimenting with jet-powered drones that could zip along at 300 miles per hour or more. Against those, Iron Shield would need upgrades to keep pace. Still, the designers say it's flexible enough to be adapted as drone technology evolves. Then there's the question of cost. Shooting down drones with traditional air defense missiles can cost hundreds of thousands, or even millions, of dollars for a single shot. Iron Shield, by comparison, costs tens of thousands per activation. Still expensive, but much cheaper than firing off advanced missiles every time a cheap, mass-produced drone wanders into the sky. At the moment, Iron Shield can work with a range of unmanned aerial vehicles, but details are still vague. One of the big goals is to integrate interceptor drones, fast, nimble machines designed specifically to hunt and disable enemy UAVs. That piece isn't fully ready yet, but work is underway. Kapoor himself admits the original systems weren't built to stop swarms of cheap strike drones because that threat is so new. Europe is essentially racing to catch up. There's already a test case in Ukraine. A scaled-down version of Iron Shield is up and running there, paired with a third-party gun system. When the sensors pick up incoming Shaheds, the gun can open fire. It's not perfect, but it proves the technology can be adapted to real combat situations. Europe knows there's still a lot of tweaking, trials, and demonstrations needed before the drone wall is battle-ready. But officials are paying serious attention, and they have reason to. Throughout September, Russia has steadily escalated its drone incursions, sending the message that these tests aren't accidents. They're part of a bigger pattern. If Europe drags its feet, Russia won't sit around and wait politely. Moscow has already shown that it's happy to use drones not just as weapons, but as tools for intimidation. Each time one drifts across a NATO border, even if it doesn't drop a bomb, it sends a message: we can touch you whenever we want. So what does escalation actually look like? First, Russia could step up the frequency of these drone incursions. Instead of 1 or 2 drones testing NATO's borders every now and then, imagine swarms of them buzzing across Poland or the Baltics on a regular basis. Some would be unarmed, purely for provocation. Others might carry explosives, designed to target military bases, radar stations, or even critical infrastructure like power plants and airports. The psychological effect alone, constant alarms, constant scrambling of jets, would wear on NATO countries and their citizens. Second, Russia could introduce faster and smarter drones. The Shahed drones it uses now are basically flying mopeds, cheap, loud, and relatively easy to spot. But Russia is investing in jet-powered UAVs capable of flying hundreds of miles per hour. If those get deployed, they'll be harder to detect, harder to intercept, and much more likely to break through traditional defenses. Third, drones could be paired with cyber attacks. Imagine a swarm of drones distracting air defenses while hackers try to jam communications or disable radar systems. That kind of hybrid warfare is exactly how Moscow likes to operate, blending digital attacks with physical ones to overwhelm opponents. If left unchecked, the long-term danger is that these small provocations become normalized. NATO members could start treating drone intrusions as routine, which plays right into Putin's hands. Once that line is blurred, the leap from buzzing drones to actual missile strikes doesn't feel so drastic anymore. This is why NATO and the EU are treating the eastern flank like the front door to all of Europe. If that door stays unlocked, Russia has every incentive to keep testing it. And history shows that when Russia tests, it usually pushes until someone pushes back harder. NATO's immediate answer is still the traditional playbook: fighter jets, missiles, and ships. But the EU's drone wall idea represents something bigger, a shift from reacting to attacks to preventing them in the first place. If the wall works, it changes the game from constant scrambling to active deterrence. September has been a busy and tense month in Europe's skies. Russian aircraft have been showing up again and again over the Baltic Sea, forcing NATO countries to scramble jets just to keep watch. Sweden, Denmark, and Germany have all had to respond to Russia's Su-30 fighter planes and Il-20 surveillance aircraft prowling near their airspace. Technically, these Russian planes were flying in neutral zones, but the way they maneuvered was suspicious enough to set off alarms. Then, on September 19th, things went a step further. A group of 3 MiG-31s crossed directly into Estonia's airspace. They ignored repeated warnings to turn back, hanging around long enough that NATO had no choice but to send fighters to escort them away. This wasn't some casual, oops, we strayed off course. It was a deliberate provocation, and it didn't stop there. Just one day later, on September 20th, Poland reported that 2 Russian fighter jets had wandered dangerously close to an offshore oil platform in the Baltic Sea. Once again, Polish interceptors were scrambled to respond. Russia wasn't launching missiles, but it was testing boundaries, poking and prodding to see how NATO would react. Then came the Copenhagen scare. On September 23rd, 3 large drones appeared near the city's airport, close enough to force the runway to shut down for 4 straight hours. Flights were delayed, travelers were stranded, and Danish authorities believed the drones were controlled by a highly skilled operator. At this point, suspicion naturally turns toward Russia. Ukraine has advanced drone operators too, but Ukraine isn't in the business of shutting down European airports. The pattern fits too well with Moscow's behavior. All of these incidents, Estonia's airspace violation, Poland's oil platform scare, and Copenhagen's airport disruption, paint a clear picture. Russia is growing bolder. Each test makes Putin look more confident about pressing NATO's defenses. Each intrusion forces Europe to ask the same question. Is this the moment it escalates into a real attack? Each test makes Putin look more confident about pressing NATO's defenses. Each intrusion forces Europe to ask the same question. Is this the moment it escalates into a real attack? That uncertainty is the whole point. Maybe the next violation won't involve bombs or missiles. Or maybe one day it will. Putin may even be gambling that if he sends enough drones and jets without firing a shot, Europe will start to believe an attack will never come, so that when it finally does, it'll be a total surprise. Analysts argue that words alone won't stop this pattern. A September 23rd piece from The Conversation bluntly warned that the coalition backing Ukraine, many of them EU nations, needs to be prepared, not just willing, to act. The outlet even suggested that Putin might be using these provocations as cover, a way to distract from the cracks in his claim that Russia is destined to win in Ukraine. But distraction or not, Europe doesn't have the luxury of waiting. NATO and the EU still haven't drawn a clear red line for the Kremlin, and without one, Russia will keep pushing. That's why Ursula von der Leyen's push for a drone wall feels like more than just talk. If built, the wall would send a message. NATO's eastern flank is the red line. Any Russian drone or even fighter jet that crosses it could be intercepted and destroyed. This is why the drone wall is no longer just a theory. It's creeping closer to reality every time Russia tests the skies.
If you've made it this far into the video, it means you're enjoying what we do here at Euro Bulletin. Take a second to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss more updates and insights from Europe and its partners. Let's dive in more into the subject.
One of the more intriguing debates around the drone wall has less to do with technology and more to do with politics. The Independent points out that if Europe goes through with this project, it could signal a major step toward reducing its reliance on the United States. Not because Washington is turning its back on Europe, but because America appears increasingly focused on shoring up its own defenses. According to reports, U.S. arms shipments that were supposed to flow to Europe for Ukraine's benefit are being scaled down as the Pentagon diverts weapons back into American stockpiles. Even so, U.S. leadership isn't exactly hands-off. President Donald Trump has been vocal in his stance that NATO shouldn't hesitate to shoot down Russian jets if they stray into Allied airspace. Asked directly whether that should be on the table, Trump's reply was blunt. Yes, I do. He followed it up by saying, of course, that it depends on circumstances, but he emphasized America's commitment to NATO as a founding member of the alliance. Later that same week, Trump went even further in a Truth Social post, claiming he now believes Ukraine is positioned to take back all its territory. He argued that Russia's economy is buckling under pressure, calling Moscow a paper tiger, and suggesting that with European money, NATO backing, and enough time, Kyiv could actually win outright. It's a dramatic reversal from some of his earlier rhetoric, but one that underscores just how seriously the U.S. still views the conflict. That said, Europe can't simply wait for Washington to bankroll its defenses. Which raises the big question, can the EU actually build the drone wall? On paper, the idea looks solid. The Iron Shield platform and other prototypes are impressive, but they'll only work if there's real investment behind them. Funding, manufacturing, and political commitment. As Politico noted, Europe has a serious problem with cost-effectiveness. Knocking out cheap Russian drones with million-dollar missiles isn't sustainable. It's a lopsided equation designed to drain NATO's stockpiles. CNN highlighted a similar issue when recalling how NATO jets intercepted an Iranian missile and drone strike on Israel earlier this year. The defense worked, but the cost was staggering, over $1 billion. Europe knows it cannot spend that kind of money every time Russia decides to launch a swarm of Shaheds. That's why the drone wall isn't just about defense. It's about finding a more affordable way to protect European skies. But affordability isn't the only obstacle. The technology has to mesh seamlessly with NATO standards. That means the drone wall must be smart enough to tell the difference between friendly NATO drones and hostile Russian UAVs. Otherwise, the system risks shooting down its own side's equipment, a mistake Europe can't afford in a live battlefield environment. And then there's the production problem. Even if Iron Shield and similar systems can jam or redirect incoming drones, Europe will still need large numbers of its own drones to hunt down and neutralize Russian UAVs. Right now, Europe's collective drone industry is far behind Russia's in scale. But there's one country with experience, capacity, and motivation that could change that equation: Ukraine. Ukraine's drone industry exploded in response to Russia's invasion. Factories across the country are churning out UAVs of all shapes and sizes, from kamikaze drones to long-range reconnaissance craft. President Volodymyr Zelensky has even claimed Ukraine could build up to 8 million drones per year if it had the financial backing. The only thing standing in the way is funding. That's where Europe comes in. A partnership could be a win-win. The EU gains access to an established drone industry that already knows how to counter Russian tactics, while Ukraine gains the resources to scale up production. In effect, Europe's shortage might be solved by leaning on the one country that has turned drone warfare into an art form.